Hello, hello. Unfortunately, it's still just a little ill, but I wanted to come and make this video because there was a Twitch streamer. I'm not going to take the time to remember who, but they mentioned that they believe difficulty should equal strength in fighting games. And I've thought about this before. I've asked around about it, and it's good argument to or good debate to have. I mean, I think in this game, it's pretty frustrating to play if you play a harder character because it feels like they just get kind of nerfed. Like people could look at Venom, who's like the worst character in the game, and be like, "Oh, he has this. We gotta remove it, but we gotta buff Slayer because he's Slayer or something." Right? There's two different sides to this. Obviously, like I mentioned, there's the yes, harder characters should be stronger or should be at the top, like the top tiers, right? Or there's no, difficulty should not be the deciding factor in strength of a character, right? I think one thing to notice about harder characters is there's a lot more skill expression in harder characters, right? More tools, stronger tools that typically have a lot of depth around them, or just the characters in general. So yeah, more skill expression, stronger tools that will allow like better players to express their full ability in the game. It makes high level play or going for harder things more rewarding, and it's overall a good investment. One of the biggest issues in fighting games, and especially this game, which I think we'd all agree in, is characters that are hard in this game, like Oscar or Venom. It just feels like for what they're doing, it doesn't feel worth it. The execution doesn't feel worth the reward when you could just go play Slayer and do something like that, right? Like next is, it comes more, this obviously, well, I guess the main conversation itself is balancing, but if you make easy characters just as strong as the harder character, then essentially in higher top level play, what's the point of the character, right? If you have to go the length of doing backflips and flipping your controller in multiple different ways and breaking your fingers and rebinding your binds to play a character, but the easy character in the game does what they do in like a touch of a button, then essentially that character just becomes like, wow, like what's the point of this character, right? So that's another reason. The last reason I can think of for why harder characters should be stronger. I just briefly talked about skill expression, but if a character is high execution or requires the player to have a pretty knowledgeable about the game to be able to play the character, or I guess to pilot the character, there should be a payoff, right? There should be that feeling of feeling good for playing a character and taking the time to put in the effort, because if harder characters are not stronger, then why put in the effort in the first place, right? And I think these are fair, and I know a lot of people hate these technical characters, especially in a game that like Strive, which is obviously what I'm referring to, but especially in a game like this, it's so frustrating where, again, it's just such a violent game that you mess up once on a character that is more technical and you're trying to put in the work, then it just feels like that easy character just comes, hits you, and then, wow, I just died, dude. Like, whoa. Right? And like, how is that fair, right? So I'm not saying that every character in the game, every harder character in the game should be broken, but I do see the argument for why they should be at least stronger. I don't think a training wheels character should be in the top tier, and I think that's a problem with Strive right now, is training wheels characters are currently running the game, and that is it's not fun because the harder characters just keep getting nerfed over and over and over again. But for ideas, or I guess the reasons on why I can see people would say that difficulty should not equal strength. A lot of people like to see that strength just comes from well-designed tools. Pretty basic moves, well-designed, that fits the game's, direction, I guess. Not really a lot of execution requirements, so this kind of leads into the next point, being accessible, making characters accessible for all. If all the best characters are just extremely difficult, then it becomes like, if you're not a person that likes to play those type of characters, it becomes like a wall if you're trying to be competitive or take the game somewhere, right? So obviously you have to have those easier characters in the mix, and I think those are two good reasons to why this claim, or why this side has a good argument. I think overall the best solution is high execution characters, they should be strong. I do agree with the side that high execution characters should be strong. I think that characters like this shouldn't be oppressive, and I don't think they should be running the game, but I think they should be strong and be able to to fit in the meta. Obviously, they're going to take some extra work, but I think the reward should be there for the players. Just don't make them over-tuned. Characters, for example, Oscar on release, Happy Chaos, his whole life, right? I think characters that, to these technical characters, they have to, typically they're balanced with more flaws than your average character, but it's harder to get to those flaws because there's a huge knowledge check a lot of the times on these harder characters, right? So the player that could be playing the easy bake oven character, to win versus the other character, they have to actually put in some effort and figure out what the character does. So make these technical characters actually have flaws, right? For example, Zato, maybe if you want to say things like Ino, who, actually no, that just hurt my soul even saying, but characters like Zato, for example, he has good tools, but it's pretty hard to use him effectively. And I guess I'm more referring to Zato when he was buff, because not current Zato, but that Zato was, it felt rewarding. It felt so good to beat him because typically you put in the work and the effort to lab versus the character to figure out his weaknesses, right? Obviously, he lost some bad matchups, and he should. Characters like that or like this probably will lose default, like, to at least one character in the game that just kind of counters their kit. So it's good that these characters have flaws, but just keeping them in check by making sure their power level isn't over the top is, I think, the best way to go about. But yes, I do believe players should be rewarded for playing harder characters. It's not good when, for example, like Strive 3.0, when Sol and Kai are like top 1 and 2 because they're easiest characters in the game, but hey, like the system mechanics and everything is just so pointed towards them and blah, 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 right? So I'd be curious to hear everyone's take on this. Do you think that harder equals stronger, or do you think that difficulty in these characters should not equal their strength? Curious to hear what everyone has to say. But that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. Until the next time, thank you.